I think ultimately everybody's seeking authenticity. So my recommendation would be find your own voice and find what's unique about you. Whether it's your life story, the things that make you more human, your vulnerabilities, the mistakes that you've made, finding your angle.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today we're speaking with Giovana Carvalho, the managing director of Teachable, who brings a unique global perspective to the American creator economy through her Brazilian roots and international business experience. In this episode, we explore how Giovana's background shapes her vision for Teachable and creator entrepreneurship.
I'm Brazilian. That's why I chose Hotmart as one of the companies to work for. I come from an economics degree, and then I first joined strategic consulting. That was my first job, named Boston Consulting Group.
Our conversation takes us through her insights on the differences between creator economies around the world.
Hotmart's purpose, mission, and back then Teachable actually lived so close to my heart because I always thought growing up, my mom is a teacher. And I look at her power and I think how exponential that could be once you apply that at scale.
And make sure to stick around till the end for Gio's perspective on how creators can leverage AI in the near and far future.
I think what AI can fuel by far is that they can accelerate the mechanical parts of the work. So if you want to sell to a global audience, you can now generate subtitles, sell globally a lot more easily than ever before.
This episode offers a unique window into the vision behind Teachable through the international lens of our leader. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Giovana.
I think my story is going to be less exciting than some of the creators and amazing personas that sit here with me. Not on this exact couch, but like on Zoom calls. But I'm Brazilian. That's why I actually chose Hotmart as one of the companies to work for. I come from a background in economics, actually, an economics degree, and then I first joined strategic consulting. That was my first job, named Boston Consulting Group. It's a competitor of McKinsey, Bain, and so I started working in São Paulo, but I've always had a foot in the international environment. So when I was here, I specialized mostly in go-to-market projects. So I did pricing projects, like international expansion projects and so, and I always had a connection with other countries. So I worked in projects in Argentina, Mexico, and many others in Latin America and some in Europe as well. Then towards the end of my time at BCG, I decided to pursue a transfer. Then I moved to Boston, which is the headquarters of Boston Consulting Group. I lived there for 2 years. And then still there, I had this international connection. So I was doing projects overseas for the UK. And then I would travel to the UK every single week while living in Boston. That was insane. That was the wildest time in my life, I think, in my career. Then also worked a little bit in Puerto Rico, which I know is not really another country, but still. And then a pandemic hit, I came back to Brazil, left BCG, decided to pursue some more of the tech environment. And then back then it was the time that venture capitalists were like making a splurge and really driving lots of activity in the venture capital space and tech space. So I spent a year and a half in a healthcare company. I led their strategy and growth strategy, reuniting like intel and data on health insight, and also like making services very convenient and scheduling appointments and visits to the hospital and so, and also reuniting that intelligence back. But ultimately, I wanted a very digital native environment. So I spoke to one of our investors. They introduced me to Hotmart. It was the first time that I actually heard in more depth about the creator economy. I sort of saw nudges here and there, like sprinkles, but never really seeing it in totality. It's funny, like the month that I joined, which I think was July 2022, the month after I had the opportunity to come here to BH. We are in BH, a small town in not small, but small compared to São Paulo, where I'm from, in Brazil. And they were running Fire Festival, which is one of the largest events in creator economy in the whole globe. Back then, it was, I think, 7,000 people visiting BH for that purpose. Now we're already at 10,000 coming to BH every year for that festival. So it has grown dramatically. But even so, like my first impression of Hotmart was, what's happening here? This is insane. And then I got to know some creators and so, and I joined Hotmart working in a strategy operations role. And my first project or program was in partnership with Teachable. So I worked in that capacity for 2 years. And more recently, with some more changes that we decided to execute, I was invited to take this position within Teachable, which has been my pleasure since August last year.
So that's so interesting. You came from an economics background. Before we even talk about like the difference of Brazil or America, my mind has been blown getting to learn about the creator economy. I didn't know that business existed like it did. I knew there were influencers like shaking their booty for money in LA, but not the whole side
No
we
prejudice.
see. Yeah, no prejudice. But like that's the only model I thought existed. What is the creator economy like here in Brazil?
Yeah. Not gonna lie, that side also exists a lot in Brazil. But I think Hotmart's purpose, mission, and back then Teachables, of course, actually lived so close to my heart because I always thought growing up, my mom is a teacher. I don't know if I ever told you that actually. Oh. She's a children teacher, and I see the power of what she does. You know, she almost taught my dog how to talk. Seriously, it's insane the power of education that she has. And I look at her. She has a very like routine job, and she goes into an actual classroom and uses the dartboard and everything. And I look at her power and I think how exponential that could be once you apply that at scale, you know? And I'm talking about a woman, a person that comes from a formal teaching background and she's being formally prepared to do so. But also at home, I have another example with my father. He owns a custom built furniture company. And right now I'm renovating my apartment, which I thank God every single day that he's there supporting me with advice. And so and I look at him and see how much like technical knowledge and things that you only do by living through years of experience and know the mistakes, the things, a pipe that you're going to find, you know, something that you cannot change because 3 years in, it's going to become a problem. That type of knowledge doesn't live necessarily in formal institutions. And when I look into creator economy players and think how they can really transform that potential and make it live at large scale, impacting hundreds, thousands, millions of people's lives, that's what excites me. And I think Hotmart is able to do that very well. Teachable is able to do that very well. So back to the joke of people shaking the booties in LA. It's absolutely no problem, right? And of course, entertainment has a role in people's attention. And so I actually think I learned better by being entertained than through formal institutions. So I think creators, and especially knowledge creators or educator, I think they marry those two capabilities that make them very unique when they're able to entertain while educating, or the other way around. I think they typically have a power of identifying what really speaks to one individual and what's the format, what's the analogy, what's the thing that you're able to do that's going to move the needle, perhaps more so than formal institutions.
Is there an obvious difference between the kinds of creators you see successful in Brazil versus America?
I think especially like comparing Teachable's main creators with Hotmart main creators, let's bear in mind where Brazil is an emerging country and most of Latin America's, not all, are also emerging countries. I feel like people here see creating content or producing content as an opportunity to move up socially. So it's almost like they're once in a lifetime opportunity, and they embrace that like to make social movement really and to gain some wealth and accumulate more social power and so.
Is that culturally like everyone sees it that way?
It's not that everyone sees it that way, but since there's so much social inequality, I think there's a mass of people that are in an unprivileged position that don't necessarily access as much formal education, or they are not necessarily sitting in like the power circles of being part of huge companies, and so they're not at the board of directors necessarily. And their main possibility, or one of the main possibilities for social mobility, is actually like being an entrepreneur and put it all in, betting on themselves and starting to produce content and putting their face out there. So I see that almost shapes up behavior in a way that they embrace that opportunity and go all in. And it's not a side hustle typically. I think that becomes their main life purpose. And this is how they're going to provide for themselves, for their family, perhaps build some generational wealth as well. So I think that changes the way they also see longevity and how much they need to sort of perpetuate their power and influence and their portfolio. So you see a lot more often they try, once they reach a certain limit, a certain audience limit, they start getting partners and sort of coaching other creators so they can continue to live through other creators and perpetuate that impact. In the US, I think people typically have more opportunities or like other opportunities equally relevant. So I see a lot more often that some people that have already spent years in a traditional corporate culture or corporate career, they have accumulated some wealth. Sometimes they don't need to do anything like to provide for themselves anymore, and they can think about what's the lasting impact that they want to have in the world, mostly for their own fulfillment, and not necessarily providing for their families, having that pressure on their shoulders. And so, and that I think expands a different range of possibilities. While they can take almost the luxury of taking more one-to-one approaches, having more coaching sessions, taking it a little more slowly, a little more easily. And while I think in Brazil and some Latin American countries, it's more like all in. I'm gonna make it. I'm not gonna sleep for a couple of years if necessary. Gonna travel, put a lot of money into launches, into also them learning the techniques and the ins and outs of creator economy. I think that's a trend that I started to see, sort of a comparison. Nobody has told me, but that's my take on the market.
Do you think the economy, like the structural framework of the creator economy, is the same in both countries?
The opportunities are definitely similar. The way they shape up and sort of the way the market is formed becomes different depending on people's behaviors, right? So if a creator is like, it's a set of people that are seeing that as their once in a lifetime opportunity, they sort of create that circle of friends and people, mentors, who are almost coaching each other on how to like extract the maximum of that potential. While I think in the US, people have perhaps less of that sense of such a strong community of mentors with other mentors. I think it's a little more spread around different pockets of talent. So you can have lots of potential creators or actual creators within companies, like inside corporations. You can have people in the art space. You can have, I think it's a little, there's more variety perhaps in the US. But speaking more specifically about the market, still under sort of the main mentality or mindset, I think in Brazil and Latin America, it's a lot more common to see launches and to drive more urgency and time urgency on demand, like to access that content. While I think in the US, and I'm speaking about a lot about the US, but I think it sets the tone for other countries as well. I see a lot more evergreen, a lot more not putting as much money on paid media and people living through their organic content and sort of playing it a little bit easier and take it with more calm, because there's not such rush and such pressure to generate as much wealth and like make it a hit.
Do you think audiences are fundamentally different too?
Perhaps. Human beings are always human beings, right? So, so the fact of wanting to be entertained and wanting like to have a sense of curated content that speaks to how they want to learn about something, having a sense of belonging and feeling embraced as part of a community, of identification with a certain creator. I think those traits are common across geographies, I might say. But I feel like the Brazilian audience is definitely more used to that time pressure and to the launches logic, while perhaps in other countries not as much. You sort of need to pay to play in an organic way. So people expect to see more free content, to see to see the creator more out there and access more, almost gain that trust, earn that trust before they're able to sell something.
Yeah, we see that a lot, especially on YouTube. I think people's audiences are entitled to free content.
Right.
So it's hard for them to start charging.
Yeah.
But I'm,
It's funny you say that, actually. That made me remember of some other comparison point. I was looking to some statistics recently of social media consumption, and not many people know that Brazil is actually one of the highest consuming countries. I think we're at third on YouTube users, third on Instagram as well. So we're always like in the top five at least. But in Brazil, it's a lot more common to see creators who see great success. They almost must have a large audience. And in Brazil, yeah. So when you look into Hotmart's top creators, they have massive audiences, especially on Instagram, but also YouTube at times. In the US, people perhaps can take more of the luxury of going a little deeper. So there's in-depth connections, but not such a strong reliance on audience size.
I imagine US creators can just charge more too, right?
Most probably, yeah.
Yeah. But part of why I ask these things is because it's I think the biggest crutch of Americans just like only really speaking English. That's a generalization, but as a country, we're not well versed in a bunch of languages if you didn't grow up with it. So even since I started working for Teachable or with Hotmart, I created a new YouTube channel where I only look up Spanish and Brazilian content because mine will not serve me anything that's not in English. So we have no insight into how the rest of the world is working if they're not speaking English. If you could give either just what you see Brazilian creators doing that you think American creators can learn from and vice versa. Sure. Do you have a number one advice for either side?
I think first, what the Brazilian creator, average creators, is doing that I think could benefit a lot the US creator, I think it's twofold. First, I believe they help one another a lot. So back to my point on having a community of mentors, and so I see the average frequency of large creators into masterminds or getting coaching sessions from other massive creators, and so is a lot higher than in the US. Hopper is another example of that. Fire ultimately is a big connection event where you see 10,000 people coming together and discussing the trends of creator economy, how they can help one another. So I feel like that sense of community is a lot stronger here. And I quite like the most recent episode of the podcast, what the anti-hero comment, right? I believe in those forums in smaller groups is when people allow themselves to be anti-heroes, and not only because even though we're very fluent in social media language and we know how it rolls, sometimes we fall into the same trap of thinking everybody's perfect, everybody's beautiful, and they know what they're doing perfectly, and they know the ins and outs and everything. So it's somewhat easy to get into that trap. I think once you're with peers and they're talking about their challenges, they're sitting on a hot seat and saying, "I don't know what to do." I mean, this is where you get deep and you get real connections. So and it's frequent in the U.S. and more developed countries, perhaps, since people are not as much in those groups, that they might feel very lonely and getting to the cusp of burnout perhaps a little more quickly. And so I think that sense of community is something that I would love to see more of in the US. We're actually trying to build that with Teachable, with T-Connect coming up. It's going to be our first event hosted in New York soon in May. Check out our social media for that. Yeah, and I think the second one still on what Brazil does well, but then I'll go the other way around. I think their sophistication when it comes to sales tactics is very big and really advanced. It surprises me at times.
In Brazil?
Yes, because they have massive portfolios and massive audiences, and so they really master the techniques of how to create sales funnels and drive repeated purchases. And so first time I heard about AI applied as to an inside sales flow, I think dated 2 years ago, like one of Hotmart's events, when people were commenting how they were using an automation and Instagram to pipe leads into an AI that would hopefully enrich that data and then have a sales team approaching them to sell courses online. So it was not like selling a super high ticket, but selling courses. So I think because of that strive to make an impact and build generational wealth, and so they really invest a lot of time thinking those things through. And really the market here in Brazil has gotten to a point of sophistication that's impressive. That sometimes we undermine. In the US, while I absolutely respect the fact that people might want to take it more as a side hustle and more for their own pleasure and fulfillment, ultimately, what drives those people is a common factor of they want to impact the maximum amount of people and have more people thinking that's easier to get into adulthood or to mature than it was before accessing that content. So sometimes I think US creators could see that sophistication in sales tactics not only as money for money, but also as a way to drive more impact and to access more people. So that's another thing that I would highlight. And on the other way around, I think US creators have really created portfolios, multi-format portfolios, more so than the Brazilians I know or I typically interact with. So typically they will have a physical product and a high ticket, whether it's a coaching session or a mentorship session, or they sell B2B, selling to other corporations. I think they expand their territories a lot more than I see in Brazil. I think in Brazil it's more the bread and butter of courses. And so with all respect to courses, because we actually love them at Teachable as well. But I think the versatility that I see in the US is more interesting at times. And I think the fact that they are able to balance out with their life quality and also respecting their priorities, because not everybody's there for the money, right? And that's totally fine. You can also be there for your own fulfillment. Great. Build an impact, influence other people. That's also very, very noble. So I like the fact that they are true to themselves as well.
What do you see as one of our biggest challenges in marketing to an American market that you think doesn't exist in Brazil?
I think back to the same components that we were discussing, right? In the US, you're competing with more alternatives for attention. I think you're also competing with more alternatives on how to generate income. So in Brazil, perhaps it might be a more obvious choice to get into the creator economy and start putting out content and so. While in the US, people have more alternatives to generate that same type of impact or get that same size of income, if not higher at times. So it's hard to convince people like to make that first jump. And there's also the social component of that, because I think in some pockets of population in Brazil, that burden or like that proof to your family, to your friends that you're doing the right thing, that there's actually potential in that niche, that has been overcome to a great extent. I think in the US, especially as you get into newer pools of talent, of people who are in corporations or young professionals that want to actually propagate their knowledge and their expertise, there's still a little bit of prejudice, and I think we need to share more cases and make sure people start like shifting their perspective and approaching it differently, not just as shaking their boots in in LA, but also finding a way to make their expertise more scalable and more impactful. That's the way that I see getting to a greater economy.
Are you over your fear of AI?
No, no. I think AI can be a very significant propeller of many things that we wanted to do as humanity, as humankind for many years, I think. Of course, I've seen enough sci-fi movies that I worry about robots attacking the globe. But ultimately, I think almost the same power that the Industrial Revolution had back in the day, I think it can transform how we invest our time. In the same way that a washing machine has completely transformed a household like time and routine, I think AI is going to revolutionize workers' time. It's going to revolutionize decision making, pretty much everything. But ultimately, any new technology has sort of a spike in curiosity and people putting out like crazy stuff at times. But it trends back to a certain average, right? When the real thing gets through it, and it's the one that stays in the long run. And typically, that thing that stays true is the one that enables humans to be human. So I wouldn't go past it and assume, oh, robots are going to take everything, and there's no space to show my individuality, the things that make me a human with feelings and my own expertise. And so no robot is going to be able to imitate that. And hopefully people still want to have that human connection and have that sense of reciprocity, of proximity, of learning through sort of a mentor, someone who lived life in the past and is able to point you to the shortcuts, to the traps to avoid, and so.
How do you think of that relative to education? Because that's part of why I love this space. Even if AI can walk me through something step by step, education is messy. And like, there's nothing like a teacher who's made the same mistakes.
Yeah.
So I was curious, just like your deeper thoughts on out carrying AI.
Perfect. I think everybody has been through that moment where you are really searching for a piece of content or some knowledge, and then you go to ChatGPT or some LLM model, and then you type something, and the response or the output that you get is sort of, it's not really what I was looking for. I haven't actually saved my time here. And typically, those are the things that they don't really connect to the specific situation that you're talking about, or the combination of different inputs, and still, fortunately or unfortunately, the human brain is sort of the only machine or only robot that's able to build that connection and sort of be that connective tissue, literally, on plugging all those pieces of information together and making something beautiful out of it that makes sense, that speaks to that individual reality. So when we bring that to creators or educators, and so I think what AI can fuel by far, perhaps never ever seen in the history of content creation, is that they really can accelerate the mechanical parts of the work, right? So if you want to sell to a global audience, you can now generate subtitles, dub, sell globally, like a lot more easily than ever before. What AI is not going to do is care about that one student in China that's having a situation with their bosses or with their political context, and they need specific recommendation on how they tackle that situation. That's actually something that you're only going to learn and be able to build a report if you access like the context of that specific individual. So I don't think humans are going to be replaced in that relationship. And I think the individual, like the creator, still has a lot of implementation content or sort of getting to the weeds of reality that no AI can substitute either. So as you're getting to professionals, for example, or people who have had corporate careers and so, unfortunately, AI has not been, or fortunately again, and not to be replaced. They don't go like to the coffee downstairs and have that side talk with their boss, so they know what happens behind the scenes, and while a professional who has lived so many years that way and knows what happens on the background, knows how important it is to have that human connection, they're able to almost like bypass and elevate the type of knowledge and recommendation that they give to another professional a lot better than any robot could do. Just to give some examples. But
Yeah, it's just that you are talking about what AI could do well very differently than what I see as like the common narrative in this space. I hear this fear that now, well, the robot can meet anyone exactly where they're at. But you're basically saying you don't believe without human context that you can actually educate someone in that situation?
yeah, I think you can do perhaps 80% of the job, but not really, or maybe they can take the seed that only a human can give, that one prompt, that one input, and then expand that content massively, almost covering 80%. But again, there's the finesse at the end that's going to make all the difference, almost like the last mile logistics. You can figure out like if you're doing a shipping and then you do great in like the long haul flight or the vessel, and so, but ultimately you screw up in the last mile, yeah, the perception is not going to be good. I think content creation is similar. If you do 80% of the job well, which I think AI is able to do, but that last polish, that last tweak doesn't have you in it, why are people paying for that? And I think if people don't imprint their personalities, their experience, and so, I think the quality is somewhat killed.
This podcast is brought to you by Teachable, the platform that empowers you to share your knowledge, engage deeply with your audience, and earn all on your own terms. Because you are more than your 9-to-5, and Teachable has everything you need to grow the business or side hustle you think about while you're at your day job. You can get started turning your knowledge into a business for free at teachable.com. That's teachable.com, which is also linked in the show notes or description wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now back to the episode. I hope I'm not mincing your words, but I liked hearing you, a CEO, saying that you're looking at these creators as a community of people making the same decisions and choices you are, because they're running their own companies. Yeah. What was like a big aha moment, or did you hear specific things you took away for your own leadership from the way they're running their businesses?
That's a great question. I think most people, if not all, don't really know everything that they're doing. You're just trying to get by and doing the best that you can. And that's fine. I think that's the beauty of it. There's been only a few months that I'm in this role, right? So, and I think a perfectionist at essence. Jonah, you tell me, I don't know. But we try to make everything right and like listen to different people and do your best at everything, and then care about every single department or the main programs that are happening simultaneously and so. But not everything is going to go perfect all the time, and that's fine. That's actually the beauty of life. I think if you sort of an aha moment for me was Crystal actually speaking in our panel saying, if you're putting your best out there, you're like putting your energy and you're really trying to make the best of what you can, that's already it. That's the essence of things. So there's a lot of uncontrollable things that you're never really going to get a hold of, and that's fine. I think that's the beauty of life that we sort of need to learn. Yeah. It's easier said than done. Some days when you look into some things, you're like, oh. But then if you come back to center, and so I think things are fine.
Do you ever want to be a creator? Because I think this company is so far, you're consistently serving people who have built massive careers or their own business. Coming into this world, is that something that you want or crave, or you like this side of it?
I see almost every single profession with a possibility to be a creator. While it's in the execution of such profession or afterwards or as a side hustle and so. So when I think about my day to day and the things that we do and so, I think there's some creator component there. So just this week, we flew everybody to Brazil from Teachable, and we're doing this integration on site here in BH. And I'm going to do the opening session, and I'm going to moderate a few events and panels. And so there's lots of content creation that's happening there, and also trying to think of the things that I know and things that I want to influence, what's the best format to convey that exact message and to spark that feeling, to spark that drive. This is like that intentionality is my mental process when I approach an event like this one, which I think is very similar to a creator, right? Back to the point of how to make their expertise unique and applicable, valuable to one individual. That's almost what I'm doing, but now thinking of Teachable, right? So I already humbly consider myself a creator at times. I think as a more formal creator career, right now I believe I'm at the moment of accumulating more experience and knowledge before putting myself a little bit more out there. I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or whatever, but I feel like I need to gain a little more repertoire before building something exclusive. But definitely a career track or activity that I'm quite passionate about. I think what creators do day in, day out is impressive, and I think has a very lasting impact in the globe.
From your position, having such a vast site over both the Brazilian and South American creator economy, now the American one, what is the business model you would go and pursue as a creator, having seen all of that, to live the life that you want to live?
I'm a lot inspired personally by the model that US creators strike and master of having different products and different representations of or manifestations of their expertise. So I love how multifaceted they are and how like they can do keynote speaking, they can do coaching sessions, they write a book, they write newsletters, they do a course, please do. They do podcasts, and so I like that versatility because I think certain things belong in certain formats, and they actually get more space and almost blossom in certain formats. So I think I'm inspired more by that model. I'm sort of doing keynote speaking or podcasts in very small proportions right now, much smaller than what our creators do. But I am starting sort of there, and then to have more longevity of my expertise, and so I think I would pursue a model of having course or a downloadable or perhaps a membership to access some content and so. But I still feel like I'm accumulating experience before doing so.
Is it focused on, though, and I know it can be a combination, but like the impact you would have, a financial situation, or like just quality of life?
All of the above.
All of the above?
Yeah. We're really jealous of creators.
I know. I am. I'm incredibly.
Hopefully.
Yeah, all the time. Coming from then a teacher, and your dad's a craftsman, what's the impact you would want to have? Like, what would you pursue?
They've had such a strong influence in my upbringing and my brothers. I feel, with all respect of the different authors and creators and so that exist out there, because they actually influence me a lot. There's lots that I learned from them. But ultimately, I think nobody's going to live up to the potential and the impact that they've had, my parents had in my life. When people ask me, what's the top career advice or life advice that you've got, my mind goes straight to my dad. Like, no question. So I think, and the quality of the perspective that he shared with me through my life only comes from experience, right? So, and the things that he saw, the mistakes that he made, the things that he did well, and so I feel like I'm going through my own journey, going through my bumps, and so hopefully I can take those and not only impact my future children, perhaps, but also other people. And I consider myself very privileged to have been exposed to their inputs and advice through my life. Not everybody have that luck and the privilege. So to the extent that I can, if anybody sees value in what I could share, I want to make sure that it makes it their way.
Now, just to conclude, I'm going to ask kind of the reverse. What do you think other people should do? But a little more specific, because so many creators I talk to, it's really hard to get them to talk to that next step. From all the things you see from your same vantage point, what do you recommend, especially in this age of AI and everything? It's so easy to get distracted. What should they focus on? What's your advice for like the next year?
We've commented a little bit on the power of AI and how I see it, whether it's a threat or an opportunity. But I think more than any of that, for almost any individual, the amount of information that we get on social media, the amount of people that are out there, and so it can drive a lot of fatigue, right? But I think ultimately everybody's seeking authenticity, and so my recommendation would be find your own voice and find what's unique about you, whether it's your life story, whether it's the things that make you more human, like your vulnerabilities, the mistakes that you've made, or your communication style. Perhaps you're a very funny finance guy. I would love to learn from that personality, perhaps. So I think finding your angle and what defines you and what might drive excitement around you, perhaps would be the most important second step, perhaps, or if not the first. And then focus on that. AI is going to come naturally to you. People are going to comment about it. If you go to any happy hour or you go to Teachable's events, if you consume content from other people, which, by the way, I think people should do by way of education and seeing what's out there, what people are discussing and seeing. So it's almost organically going to come your way. And over time, you're going to figure out how to seize that and leverage the opportunities that it brings, whether it's accelerating your editing skills, because it might not really come from the background. I do not. So for me, that's a huge leap. Whether it's putting subtitles to make your content more accessible, but whether it's transforming the format in which you produce content. So you're typically an audio person, but you want to make it more visually enticing. So AI could also help you with that and to serve and cater to specific audiences. So I think news will come and they're going to find it your way. And I think avoid being overwhelmed at first, because it can be a lot, even having a corporate job as I do. The amount of information and different tools that appear on AI. And so, and sometimes I reserve time in my week, like, so it's typically Friday night or Friday late afternoon is when I sit down and say, okay, I heard about this platform, let me check it out. And then I use it. I still haven't seen many that really like blow my mind. I think, of course, LLM models are very useful, and I don't want to undermine them by no means. I'm not insane. But the ones that are actually aimed to replace your work, like putting out entire slides presentations, which would be one of my biggest applications that would serve me as a professional. Or really, I think I'm biased by this example on slide presentation because I tried to do this for this presentation. Actually, it didn't quite work, because it's not going to strike the tone that you want. It's not going to select the imagery that you want. It doesn't have the same social background as you. So there's actually some memes from Brazil that I wanted to use. No AI will would know which memes I watched during my, young adulthood. If they know, it's going to be very creepy.
Yeah.
So I think avoid being overwhelmed to get back on my little path and just enjoy the ride. I think, especially in the US and some of those countries, you almost have the privilege of being not, we have a saying in Brazil that people sell lunch to buy dinner. In the US, most times you have that privilege of having a little more, having more social, economic, financial security. And so don't worry about making a splurge like out of from night to day. I think take it slow by slow, day by day, and you're going to find your own path and ultimately know how to scale that.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you.
Giovana is a great example of how international perspective enriches leadership in the creator economy. Her unique background, spanning Brazilian culture, economics, education, and global business experience, brings invaluable insights to Teachable and the American creators we serve. Her vision of scaling expertise and honoring educational impact shows why she's the perfect leader to help creators transform knowledge into opportunity. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episode linked here and in the description below. Thanks for being here. We'll catch you in the next one.